Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
Before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. During the supper, Jesus said to the disciples, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept the Father's commandment and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." The Gospel of the Lord.
Thanks to you, Lord Jesus.
When we read John's Gospel, especially in the last discourse of Jesus, there is one central word that keeps recurring, and that word is how to abide in Jesus. That word, abide. How do we abide? Abide, another word for it is how to remain with Jesus. How to be one in love with Jesus. In 2004, Pope John Paul II wrote his last encyclical before he died. It was an apostolic letter to the whole church, because 2004 to 2005 was the year of the Eucharist. And the title of that letter, apostolic letter to the whole church, was called, it was a Latin title, Mane Nobiscum Domine. Mane in Latin means how to abide with Jesus. And it took it from Luke chapter 24, when the two disciples that were going to Emmaus invited Jesus to come in with them. And immediately they got in, they celebrated the Eucharist, the Mass, and they recognized him at the breaking of bread. Now, as Jesus was getting ready to depart from this world, our text today says, before the Passover before the festival of the Passover, meaning that Jesus wants to replace the Passover. And so he tells his disciples, and he says, "Keep my commandments." Whenever we read this text and it says, "Keep my commandments," oftentimes people are saying, what is the commandment? Is it the 10 commandments that he's talking about? Or is it the reading of the Bible that is talking about? But we know that at the Last Supper, Jesus told the disciples, "This is the new commandment, new covenant." And what is that new covenant? The Holy Eucharist, the body and blood of Christ. And he says, "Keep this commandment, my commandment, just as I have kept my Father's commandment. Now, what was the Father's commandment to Jesus? To come down to earth and give himself, the body of Christ. That was the command. If you read John chapter 3, verse 16, it says, "For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son into the world, to come and give himself to us." And so at the Last Supper, Jesus knew that his hour had come to go give himself to the world and return to the Father. So during the supper, he now said to everybody, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love." Now, in that apostolic letter that John Paul II wrote to the whole church, he encouraged two things. He encouraged the attendance of Mass. And the second thing he encouraged us to do is adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. And he says, Jesus gave himself to us in the bread of life. So if we now look at our first reading, when Jesus gave himself at the Last Supper and gave the bread and said, "This is the new commandment," everybody around the table were Jews. Peter, James, John, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, they were all Jewish people. They thought that, okay, the Eucharist is only for the Jews because it's the body of Christ and because it replaces the Passover, and only Jewish people celebrate the Passover. So in our first reading, Acts of the Apostles chapter 15, it says the apostles and the elders met together to consider the conversion of non-Jews into Christianity. The question was, should they be admitted to the body of Christ, to the Holy Eucharist? Because people that were non-Jews were getting converted. Paul and Barnabas already went all through Asia Minor, preaching, converting people. And then there was dissension. They were considering the conversion of non-Jews, Gentiles. Should they be admitted or not? And Peter stood up and said, he says, "I know that in the early days, God made a choice among you that I should be the one through whom non-Jews will hear the message and the good news and become believers." And he went on and on and on and on and on. And after he has finished speaking, James was the first bishop of Jerusalem. James now replied, and James said, "Listen to me. Simon Peter has related how God looked favorably on the Gentiles." And then he went on and he says, it is God's intention that the church should be universal. And that is how that name, Catholic, came about. You see, the word Catholic means universal. That's the meaning. So at the first Council of Jerusalem, they decided that the church should be universal. The church is not just a Jerusalem church. It is not just Israel church. It is not just for the Jews. Jesus intended it for the whole world. And so when Jesus now teaches us in John chapter 15 and says, through the Holy Eucharist, through this new commandment, the new covenant, that is how to remain with Jesus. So later, when the theology of the church was developing, that Holy Eucharist was now called Holy Communion. Now, what is Holy Communion? The word communion is two words put together. In Latin, it's cum and union. The union of two persons. Every time we receive Holy Communion, two persons get united, abide, they remain together. Now, because Jesus is holy, we enter into that spiritual union with Jesus. And so it is important to receive Holy Communion. That is how we are united with him. And it is important to come to his presence. That's what is called real presence. When we do adoration, we do benediction, we do holy hour, we come into the presence of the Holy One. And it is important to do it. So this is the theology and spirituality of what we do every time we celebrate Mass. And it is important because Jesus Christ says, abide in my love. Because he, again, if we keep reading John chapter 15, Jesus is going to say, greater love has no one than the one who gave himself to his friends. Out of love, he gave himself to us. He says there is no greater love than that. And the way we recognize and give thanks for what he has done is our active participation in the Holy Eucharist.